Well, I'm John Gregg, and I'm on the porch, and we're glad you joined us. But you know what? A funny thing happened. Before the pandemic, we made a few classic episodes. Some things are different, mainly the way I looked, so see if you can spot it, but stay tuned. Hey, I'm glad you're here. Always like friends stop by on the front porch. We're going to have some other friends stop by, and so I better go freshen up my tea and just stay with us. I'll be right back and we'll do some visting. Guys, I'm so glad you stopped by today, making that long road trip from Vincennes to Sanborn, and I can't imagine how you worked it in your schedules now you're retired. Bet it was golfing every day almost.
I know, but just seeing you, we have to do it for you.
Well, Jude, I'll tell you what, it doesn't seem the same going to the law office without you after all those years. Are you enjoying retirement?
I am, John, but I do miss being around you and the work.
Well, I miss being around you. I don't know how much of the work I'm still doing it, so I don't necessarily miss it. But just before you guys called, it was Mom called and was kind of checking in on me. And I was thinking back, I was reminiscing a little about the first time I ran for office. I ran for the state legislature way back in 1986. And I was trying to unseat a Democrat incumbent. He'd been in office for years, and it was a tough race. He'd been in there 12 years. He was from Terre Haute. I'm from little old Sanborn, and running from north and west of Terre Haute to south of Vincennes, all the way over to Bloomfield. And I had a job for Mother because everybody in Sanborn liked Mother, and the word on me was still out. Mom's job was to try to get as many Republicans as she could call for a Democrat ballot, because that it was going to be, I either got nominated or it was over for me. And we normally had about 110 people ask for a Democrat ballot. But that year, Mom worked real hard, and her job was to try to get as many as she could. And I was hoping she'd get 150, 160. Well, she worked it, and I spent that primary day in Jasonville. And it's about 6:20, and I'm from Jasonville back in Sanborn, going to change shirts and then go down to Democrat headquarters in Vincennes, the old Charlie's Restaurant on Washington Avenue. And come into Sanborn, and there's my cousin Don shaking his bib overalls with a big chew of mail pouch, you know, in the side of his mouth. And Mom was out there, and there were about a dozen people standing around, and he had the poll book. So I knew he had the results from how Sanborn had voted. So I pull over and stop and go over there, and Don says, well, we've got a record here today, and instead of having 110, we had 248 people called for a Democrat ballot. And I'm thinking, wow, we more than doubled it. Mom, unbelievable job. And I said, what was the votes? And he said, well, 248, you had 236 votes. The incumbent had 12. And oh my, and you know, people are just looking and smiling, and I look at my mother, and the tears are welling up in her eyes, and they start going down. And I'm thinking, don't cry, Mother, because we're an emotional family. As you know, we cry when we get a new set of tires. And the longer I looked at her, she was crying, and I reached over and gave her a hug. And I said, Mother, can you believe it? 236 people voted for me. And she said, I can't believe 12 people voted against you. And only a mother's love. And, you know, I laugh and I think about that. She started trying to figure out who those 12 people were. And by Sunday, when I'm sitting in my pew at the Sanborn Methodist Church at that time in my life, I couldn't name 12 people that voted for me. So, you know, it was a typical small town story. And, you know, thinking of small towns, we've got a lot of great ones here. And there's always stories about them and things you may not know. And we're going to be talking about some things you don't know about Brazil, Indiana here in a little bit. Well, Chuck, you're from Brazil, or Brazil as I say, a hometown boy made good. Which way do you pronounce it?
Well, John, I'm pretty much Brazil. I just kind of straight line it. I think sometimes I'm fighting a losing battle on that, you know.
Well, now, do you do that because you're become so urbane over the years? But you know, Brazil, and then the county that you grew up beside, Vigo County.
Yep.
Vigo or Vigo. And I grew up, of course, in Knox County, and we're sitting right here at Sanborn, is in what I call Vigo Township, but I always say Vigo County.
Yeah, I can understand that too. You know, so many people, you know, that's just common nature to them.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, you know, it's interesting. Most people think of you as IU basketball, but me loving small towns, know you're from Brazil. And one of the most fascinating things I always tell students if I'm teaching a class is there's one city in the United States that has a monument from another country, a gift.
And that's Brazil, Indiana. It happened in the mid-1950s. A gentleman named Don Bolt taught at Indiana State Teachers College. And with that, he was very involved in international politics and diplomacy, and had a relationship with the country of Brazil, and they donated the monument, which is a replica of a fountain in a province capital.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
In the country of Brazil. Yeah. And it came down to a major fundraising. You know, the city had to come up with the money to build the monument. Okay. And it took a couple of years, but it was in the mid-50s when it was dedicated, and now I know that Mayor Wyndham and others in the community are very active in restoring it once again to former luster, and it truly is a fountain, John. You know, they want to get the spigots and the water working again and the lighting.
And it's got that, most people would say, Brazilian or Portuguese motif.
That's right.
It does have that South American Portuguese. I always like to mention Portuguese because most people think Brazil is Spanish, but as you and I know,
no, it's Portuguese.
That's Portuguese.
Sure.
You know, you mentioned Mayor Wyndham. He and I worked together at Amex Coal years ago. But speaking of mayors, your dad.
Yeah, my late father, Kenny Crabb, was 12 years the mayor. The only one that was 3 consecutive terms. He beat the gentleman that had a 4-term run in a 5-term era there, Norval
Pickett.
Yeah,
often
Mayor
indicted,
Pickett.
Never convicted.
No, that's right. But yeah, Dad retired from the school system and ran for mayor. The idea of he wanted to help better the community, jobs to keep young people there, and because about the time he was elected in 91, why, of course, the Amex and the coal mines everywhere starting to work out, and there really weren't a lot of opportunities for young folk to stay about.
Sure.
So he tried his best during those 12 years, and a lot of things that he worked with the state and other people, John, and in envisioning and planning have finally all now started coming to fruition.
You know, when I think of Brazil, that's the longest town in Indiana. You know, I mean, it starts
east to west. My goodness,
east
you
to
drive
west,
forever, don't you?
Yeah, it does. It's not like me. It's not all confined in one area. It's all spread out. You used to be the editor at the Brazil Times. We'll use both terms. My old buddy Jim Redenbarger.
Well, Jim Dressler and
Joe
Redenbarger.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, both of them. Of course, Jim passed away, probably about 2010, 2011, right along in there. Joe's still going. He calls me every November. It's like, Chuck, when are you going to get those basketball posters up here? I got to know when we're playing. I don't have anything on the wall to tell me when I need to be watching.
Well, that was a great local paper, and we could talk all day about the need for that important local paper. As you know, Jim Dressler, after he retired, contacted me through some people at the legislature because we had to have proofreaders.
Sure.
We had to make sure that the bills everything was spelled, T's crossed, I's dotted, all of that stuff. Jim Dressler wanted to be a proofreader.
He sure did.
That.
That's right.
And we had one of the best proofreading offices. We had him, and we had a retired newspaper man out of Michigan that had come back to Indiana. What a great
Yeah.
story and great guys.
Never passes out of your system, John. I mean, I haven't done a daily newspaper gig since September of '76, but I genuinely miss it. I mean, it was wonderful to be able to provide stories, help the community see what was transpiring, and I did an awful lot of features and human interest.
I bet you did.
Played away from that a little bit, and from the straight news, the school board, the county council, the commissioners, whatever it be.
100th birthday of Bertha.
Oh, exactly. You know, you go for things like that, and then you sit down. I mean, like we'd be having some tea right here now, you and I, and they'd start pouring coffee, and my goodness, that 10 or 15 minutes would all of a sudden become an hour as they were remembering my family, and I was remembering their families, and you know, it's small town America, and
Absolutely.
there's nothing like it.
No, there's nothing like it. I'm thankful every day. Next to my parents and faith, growing up in a small town did more to shape me, and I think if you grew up in a small town like you and I did, you would agree with that. I miss small town papers. You know, I was in the newspaper business too for
Yeah.
about 5 or 6 years. I delivered them.
Sure. Well, that's the other end of it. That's, you know, got to get to the front porch of the people. I mean,
Absolutely.
people are so dependent on it. Now, you know, the Brazil paper where I edited, of course, it's all under the different ownership now. I believe out of Cape Girardeau, Missouri, and they own the Linton paper and Bloomfield and different communities in Indiana, Greencastle. Now the Brazil paper is only 4 days a week, and it's delivered by the mail.
Delivered by mail. Absolutely.
No carriers.
Well, you know, we're here talking about Brazil and Clay County, and Indiana's got so many fascinating towns like that. But what I could talk with you all the time about Indiana, but a lot of people only know you as Indiana, the voice of Indiana basketball. And there's, I want to chat with you a little bit about Indiana University. You've been there 40 plus years, and you know, there's just a lot of things that people don't know about Bloomington. And one of the things you may not know about Bloomington, well, here it is. Chuck, it's always great talking basketball in Indiana, and not everybody's going to agree it's always great talking IU basketball, but when I've got the voice of Assembly Hall here with me, what's it been like? What's the last 40 plus years been like?
Oh my, you know, I wouldn't know where to begin. I mean, I took the place of a gentleman, Bert Laws, who was from Washington, Indiana, and Bert did the announcing 40 years, starting in 1936. Going through
Wow.
77.
Was Herman Wells
Yeah.
IU president?
He would have just been, yeah, exactly.
been.
Yeah, what,
And-
interim and then made permanent. Yeah.
And then and Franklin Delano Roosevelt
Yep.
would have been the U.S. president.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Wow.
you know, Bert had all of that. Now, he was an electrician. So he was kind of he was a 3-in-1 because he could install it, he could maintain it, and then Z.G. Clevenger, the athletic director, said, well, you have a nice voice. Why don't you announce it too, John? So they got the full package right there. And me, I'm an on-off switch. And
Oh.
you know, that's where I go.
You can sweep, you can do the floor.
Oh yeah, I'm chief janitor some
Okay.
days.
Well, you know what I always found interesting, in addition to announcing that game and people hear your voice, you have to have most likely one of the most recognizable voices in Indiana. You also had responsibilities for a long time with the cheerleaders.
Well, they administratively report to me, and
Okay.
yeah, they're, as a matter of fact, we're looking forward to some national competition results with them, and keeping our fingers crossed. The all-girl group, the all-female, they've been national champs 5 times. So I've got about 1,000 children, John, over my time that I've been administering the cheer program, and a lot of great friends have come out of that. And what's so much fun, John, is watching them now when they're out in their communities, seeing how they're giving back, what they're doing. they bring their children and introduce them. This is Mr. Crabb. He was our coach. He was our driver. He was our confidant when we were cheering here at the school. And of course, the kids always, are there some things you could maybe tell us about Mom or Dad? And I'm like, no, there's a code of silence.
Yeah.
You know, what happens in Bloomington stays in
Absolutely.
Bloomington.
Those college years are rich years, but sometimes some of those stories are best just left not.
Just a little smile and
just a little smile.
leave it at that.
Leave it at that automatically. Well, you've seen a lot of ball players, you've seen a number of coaches, number of athletic directors, but one thing you've seen are excited fans.
Oh,
over
very
the
much.
years.
You know, I mean, Indiana's blessed because you've got so many high schools where there's great basketball played, there's great sports played. The students want to matriculate when a college opportunity is there at any number of 16 to 25 different places in the state. We're just fortunate to be chartered as the state university and have had certainly a great run of success going back to Everett Dean's days and Branch McCracken, Coach Knight, and all that have been a part of the program over those years. And I know other universities have just as much claim for great tradition and success. Don't want to mention that place up the Monon. I mean, they've got us on a couple of Big Ten championships. Our total doesn't equal theirs, but we always kind of like to remind them of the 5 national championship banners we have to dust off every so often.
Well, you know, you were mentioning that I got my bachelor's the year you started, May of 1976.
Yeah. Okay.
My senior year, IU won the NCAA, last team to go undefeated, and I was fortunate. I went to the Checker Dome in St. Louis to watch the Hoosiers kick off that season over
UCLA.
Thanksgiving weekend.
Oh,
it was
my.
the very first game UCLA played without Johnny Wooden, having been their head coach, another famous Hoosier from a small town like us.
Yep.
And IU won. And when I hear a song, IU had a theme song that year. It was by Elton John. It was called Philadelphia Freedom.
Yep, sure enough.
And what was interesting about that was, of course, it was picked because the finals were in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and the bicentennial year of the country,
Yeah,
you know, it was a
absolutely.
perfect fit.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of special memories with Quinn Buckner and Kent Benson, Scott May, and Tom Abernathy and all of that team.
Green. I remember all of them. You know, I've got to meet and talk with Quinn Buckner recently because he'd been up at the Pacers, and just really enjoyed getting to chat with him and Kent Benson and Brother Green. I know all of them. Didn't really know them as students, but they were just being mobbed on campus.
Yeah, they were on campus.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they couldn't go anywhere that they weren't recognized. I mean, they did have the advantage of going to Bruce's Cafe. They're on West Kirkwood, West 5th Street.
Yeah.
All right, just off the square. And, you know, Pauline and Bruce Collier, they used to take awfully good care of Kent. You know, I mean, a dozen eggs goes down real easy with Benny.
I bet it does. And I remember you were talking about places in Bloomington as a student. One place that I went that I didn't see a lot of students at, but since I had grown up in the area, would go to Hinkle's Hamburgers.
Sure you would, yeah.
I was a Hinkle hamburger.
Well, they're still out there. I mean, the only place with those 4 letters that they're either open or nope. You know, if they're closed, it's nope.
Yeah.
Just kind of move them around.
That's absolutely true. Well, I sure enjoyed my time at IU, and you know, when I walk in Assembly Hall, which I don't do a lot, but when I get back for a game, nothing changes. You're in there, the bands are playing, there's a lot of cream and crimson and a lot of excitement. You remember you're a Hoosier, and you know, when you remember you're a Hoosier, you start thinking of all these great towns. You start thinking of basketball, you start thinking of the 500, and you start thinking of our 92 counties and our 400 and some towns and 100 plus cities. I mean, what a great state, what a great place. And talking about places from Indiana, here's a few pictures that I think you'll like to see. great thing about being on the front porch is you never know who's going to stop by. And Craig Brenner of Craig and the Crawdads is here with us, and I just love to hear you play.
Thanks, John. I love playing.
Well, it shows. It shows you've got a passion for music. You know, I'm the oldest of 3 boys, and my mother grew up in a family that didn't have a lot, and she never learned how to play the piano. So she decided that her boys were going to play the piano. Well, being the oldest, she forced me to take piano lessons. She couldn't force me to practice. So I play in the privacy of my own home, but hearing you play really makes me wish I would have practiced a lot harder.
Well, thank you. My mom was my biggest influence because she played piano, and we had a player piano at my house. And when I was 3 and 4, I was on the bench trying to reach the pedal to make the piano rolls move. So I loved it.
Absolutely. Well, what are you going to play for us today?
The Backstage Boogie.
Oh, I love Boogie Woogie. Well, listen, I'm going to sit back. Just take it, okay?
All right.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm so glad you joined us today. It's always fun just to sit around and visit and just kind of relax. Glad you joined me on the front porch. Listen, this coming week when you're out and about, we live in a pretty special place here in Indiana, but it's an imperfect world. So when you're somewhere and you see someone, give them a smile, because it may be the only one they get. So I'll see you later, back on the front porch.